Prynawn da a chroeso I bawb. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. Today, my name is Cerys Priest and I'm a Senior Public Health Practitioner for the Wider Determinants of Health Unit, and welcome to our Public Health Network Cymru's webinar series today. I'm delighted to welcome you to the session where we will be developing our understanding on how social business models play a greater part in delivering health and social care in Wales. We're lucky today to have with us, sharing his knowledge and expertise, Glenn Bowen. Glenn has worked for the Wales Cooperative Centre for over 20 years. Hello, Glenn. During this time, he supported the development of the cooperatives and social enterprises across the valleys in South Wales. He's the Enterprise Programme Director within the Wales Cooperative Centre and oversees a number of projects such as Social Business Wales, Care to Cooperate and Community Shares Wales. Glenn is a passionate cooperator and has been instrumental in supporting the emerging cooperative movements within the housing and social care sector. He sat on several UK national strategy panels, including the National Cooperative Development Strategy Panel and the Community Shares Advisory Panel. Before I hand over to Glenn, just a few things to mention. There'll be time at the end of the presentation for you to ask questions. We can have a bit of a discussion. So please use the raise your hand function at the end of the presentations for that. Or alternatively, just pop your questions in the chat bar. The webinar is being recorded by Public Health Network Cymru and will be available on our website after the session. Subtitles are also available and these can be switched on using the Teams function. And if you do experience any technical difficulties today, just pop it in the chat bar. One of our team here will try and help you. So that's it. So over to you, Glenn, to get going.
Brilliant. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Cerys, and prynawn da, everyone, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you for that introduction, Cerys. And basically, it means I've been banging on about co-ops for quite a long time. That's how we could actually succinctly say what I've been doing over the last few years. So I'm going to ask you to move on to the next slide, Catherine, please. There we are. Just a little bit about the Wales Co-op Centre. Some of you said you'd heard of us. We were set up in 1982. It's our 40th anniversary this year. And we were set up originally by the TUC to set up worker co-ops. And we've got funding from Welsh Government and we run projects currently for the European Union. We've got a vision for Wales to be an international leader in cooperative thinking and action. And our mission is to develop sustainable businesses and strong, inclusive communities by working cooperatively. And if we go to the next one, please, Catherine. There we are. The support available. So some of the things we do as a Wales Co-op Centre, we actually help people to create their own homes. So where we've got a shortage of housing, particularly in rural areas, we've got officers on the ground helping people come together to look at housing solutions, either community land trusts or setting up new community housing co-ops across Wales. Hopefully lots of you will have heard of Business Wales, and that provides support to our mainstream businesses in Wales. We also run Social Business Wales as part of the Business Wales family, where we help co-ops, social enterprises and employee-owned businesses. We help people with Community Shares Wales. We help people to raise equity in the form of shares from their community to purchase well-loved buildings in their community, so the pubs, the community centres and so on. And we also run Digital Communities Wales, a Welsh Government contract, where we help people to get online and to be digitally included. And we did loads of great work during the pandemic, where we were able to give out iPads and hardware so that people in nursing homes across Wales could speak to their loved ones as part of Digital Communities Wales. And we also have a commercial arm. If we look at the next slide, please, Catherine. There we are. And some of the consultancy work that we do is around social value, where we work with public sector organisations, so the health boards, local authorities, town councils, the university and education sector, and we help look at their supply chains and how we can get more social enterprises and co-ops and locally owned businesses into supply chains as part of their work, and all around the community wealth building agenda as well. And if we go on to the next slide, please. I mean, you're here today to listen to me talk about co-ops and social enterprises. And one of the reasons you are here and we are here today is some of the policy drivers out there that actually make us look into this area more. So actually, we mentioned community wealth building, and we've done some work with CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Studies. They've done a lot of work in terms of looking at anchor institutions and how local anchor institutions can be more powerful and create more economic value for the people who live and work around them. And we do a lot of work around community wealth building. Hopefully you will have heard of foundational economy or the real life economy and the work of Carol Williams in Manchester University. So again, trying to grow those businesses in the everyday economy, be it sort of social care or even down to sole trader businesses, your window cleaners that come and clean your windows. Better Jobs Closer to Home, a Welsh Government programme where the TUC promoted this idea of using our public spend to create jobs in places where we need them. So there is a pilot project in Ebbw Vale where we set up a social enterprise to reskill people in sewing and machinery to make garments and garment manufacture. So why can't we have all our NHS uniforms made in those type of factories, creating jobs in places like Ebbw Vale? Obviously, levelling up, Build Back Better, which are phrases we know from Welsh Government and UK Government, and then the legislative changes of Social Services Wellbeing Act and a Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and the upcoming Social Value Partnership and the sort of Social Value Act around fair work that's going to come in the next few years. So they're the policy drivers that hopefully are pushing you all to find out more about co-ops and social enterprises and how they can support us in the future through climate change and help us to build back after COVID. Next slide, please, Catherine. There we are. This slide just reiterates what we're talking about today in terms of and the reason why you're here. So I'm going to skip straight over that one, Catherine. Thanks. So the first one is some of you put number 1 in terms of your knowledge of sort of co-ops and social enterprises. So what is a co-op and what is a cooperative? So there's an internationally defined definition of what a co-op is by the International Cooperative Alliance. And just read through the words there for you. Cooperatives are businesses that are jointly owned, and I've underlined that, democratically controlled, underlined that, by their members, their workers or their members. Cooperative businesses should operate within 7 internationally recognised cooperative principles. So there's cooperatives right across the world. People are surprised sometimes by the number of cooperatives in the USA, but we've got them in Japan, the USA, in Europe, in Australia, and Canada. There's a worldwide movement of cooperatives that fit that definition and follow the international cooperative principles. But for all of those words, I'm going to show you a picture next, if Catherine goes on to the next slide. And what we have in this picture is a cat looking in a fridge. And for those of you who've heard me bang on about co-ops in the past, you might well have seen this picture, because those words on the previous slide are a bit wordy. But when you leave today, if someone asks you what a co-op is, just think of the cat looking in the fridge. So you can see the cat. He or she is looking up to the top shelf, probably can see a nice piece of fish. He can't quite reach it. So what does the cat do? If we go on to the next slide. There we are. The cat calls his mates in to help him reach the top shelf of the fridge. And lo and behold, it's not some fish, but it's some beer on the top shelf. And the moral of this story is, as long as cat shares beer with little dog and big dog, then that is a cooperative in action and cooperative values in action. If a cat runs off with beer, then that isn't a cooperative and cooperative action. So with all the words that I've just said, there's a classic example there of, as individuals, we are stronger by working together and we achieve more by working together. So beyond the words, if you think of the cat and his mates, the 2 dogs, getting the beer from the fridge, you won't go far wrong in understanding the basics of cooperation and cooperative working. I'd done this presentation lots, and I was doing it in a school, and then I got to this slide and I suddenly realized that potentially this wasn't the most appropriate slide within a secondary school. But as you can imagine, the pupils had a good laugh, and they enjoyed the fact that the cat was getting some beer. So on to the next slide, please, Catherine. there we are, different models of cooperatives, and basically it depends on who the members are. So if you shop in the co-op store and you have a co-op card, then you are a member of one of the largest consumer cooperatives in the world, because you are part owners, because you shop and use the services of the co-op as a consumer. So you are a part of the consumer cooperative. If the co-op is owned and managed and controlled by its workers, then it's obviously a worker cooperative. The Consortia Co-operative is slightly different. It's usually existing businesses that come together to improve their business performance by working cooperatively. And I'm going to talk a little later about GP Consortia cooperatives. So that is a good example of where the Consortia Co-op can add value to GP practices. Platform co-op is a relatively new phenomena, and we will all have heard of Uber and Deliveroo, etc., as platform businesses owned by big tech companies. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, the tech controls the labour. And actually the conditions for some of those workers are not great. So within the co-op movement, we are saying, well, couldn't we have platform co-ops where the tech is owned by the workers or the people who deliver the service? So in an alternate universe, all those people on their bikes delivering food would own the platform as opposed to big tech companies. And it's not quite the platform co-op, but we've got a really good cooperative taxi firm based in Cardiff. And if you ever need a taxi in Cardiff, then look for Drive Taxis as a really good sort of taxi co-op. And they did some great stuff during COVID where they were offering free rides into hospital for patients and families of patients. So they did a really good job. And the last one there, multi-stakeholder co-op, probably what it says on the tin is you've got a number of different stakeholders. So you could have workers, you could have consumers, and you could have other stakeholders and other supporters as members of that co-op. And I'm going to give you a model later on of one potential model using the multi-stakeholder co-op model. If we go on to the next slide, please, Catherine. There we are. Now, what I've got here is a nice picture, I think, of a Consortia cooperative model. And if you think of all those little fishes, well, all the fishes as being businesses, some of the businesses are smaller, there's some bigger ones trying to gobble up the smaller ones. And actually, if we look at the next slide, when we all come together as businesses, it actually means that we are more powerful as little businesses working together than some of those big businesses as well. So that just gives you a little picture and a break from words really about the Consortia cooperative. So that's really good. The next slide, I think we said when we started, I've got a video to play here, and hopefully this will work now with Catherine playing at her end. It worked when I was able to play at my end. When you listen to this video, if you've got any sort of questions, observations you want to put in the chat, that's fine, I can look at them, but we will have time at the end as well. But if you're sick and fed up of hearing my voice and somebody wants to come in, just put something into the chat. This video is Adrian Roper from Cartrefi Cymru Cooperative. Originally, they were a pure charity, so a traditional charity where the trustees run the charity on behalf of the organisation. Adrian wanted to change that and wanted to make it much more of a cooperative, and they brought their customers into the service and brought them in to help them design the service and change the way they delivered. So I'm hoping that Catherine can press play and we'll get to know a bit more of Cartrefi Cymru Cooperative.
I would say that Cartrefi Cymru becoming a cooperative a couple of years ago was easily the most exciting thing we've done in the last 20 years. And I've no doubt that it was the right decision. The culture of and atmosphere of our organisation has definitely been massively improved by becoming a cooperative. Co-ops exist for and through their members. Our members are the people we support and our staff. And what we are experiencing now is people stepping up in terms of new roles, in terms of having their ideas and talents respected in a way which it never was before. In a traditional social care service, people tend to receive what's been set out by a professional in a care plan. And that can lead to years and years of people not necessarily getting what really matters to them. As a cooperative, with the people that we support as full members and as valued co-producers, having a conversation with a person and valuing their contribution and their ideas and their talents and their hopes is fundamental, and it's absolutely leading to better care and support.
What's great about working as a cooperative is we're supporting people how they want to be supported, how they have told us that they want to be supported, what they want to do, what's important to them, just giving them that independence, so more choice.
I would recommend becoming a cooperative, particularly a multi-stakeholder cooperative, to any agency such as Cartrefi providing social care. And we're really fortunate in Wales to have the Wales Co-op Centre full of expertise to help people on that journey. So if anybody's wanting to do it, I highly recommend them, and they were hugely helpful to us in our early transformation stage.
There we are. So I've talked about what a co-op is, and social enterprise slightly different, and people always say, what is the difference? They're very similar as models. This is a definition of a social enterprise. So it's primarily a business, it has to be business first of all, primarily with social objectives, and the surpluses are principally reinvested into the business or into the community, rather than being driven by the need to maximize profits for owners or shareholders. I suppose one of the main differences from a co-op is that actually a co-op follows those international cooperative principles that are the same across the world, and the ownership clause, they are owned for and on behalf of their members, and that isn't always the case with a social enterprise, although we do encourage sort of the user ownership and involvement within Wales here today. And if we look at the next slide, Catherine, there we are. I've got a picture there of one of our social enterprises, Elite Paper Solutions, based in Merthyr. Elite started out as a charity providing work placements for disabled people within the private sector. And Andrea there in the middle, I used to say to Andrea, why don't you set up your own trading arm to create more jobs, you know, that you create your own jobs for the people you support. And we set them up as a trading arm as Elite Paper Solutions, and they've got contracts now collecting sensitive waste paper from the public sector and the private sector from all across South and West Wales. That goes back to their factory in Merthyr, and they obviously get rid of that in a sensitive way. And more recently, they've set up Elite Clothing Solutions, and I referred to it earlier, where they've been teaching people how to use sewing machines and create garments up in Ebbw Vale. So a really good example of a social enterprise that's innovative and looking for new ways to develop markets and create jobs and opportunities. If we go to the next slide, please, Catherine. There we are. This is another video, and this is down to earth and a really good social enterprise based on Gower, and they use the environment as a way to help people in terms of to heal and their well-being, and they go in there and spend time with Mark and the team, and not only creating wonderful things in the environment, but actually improving their health and well-being while they do that.
Hello, my name is Mark McKenna. I'm from Down to Earth in Swansea, and I'm one of the founders and one of the directors. Down to Earth is based on the Gower Peninsula. We're a social business, been running 14 years now, and we use the outdoors, like spaces that we're in right now, as a vehicle or a medium for delivering healthcare and education. And we do that mainly through working with natural materials. So everything on the site that we're in right now has been built by the groups that come to us. We specialise in working with groups of vulnerable and hard to reach young people and adults. So Down to Earth is a social business because its entire purpose is to tackle social inequality as well as environmental inequalities, and to do that through the outdoors and with vulnerable groups. So the future of Down to Earth is taking the approach to social and affordable housing, so looking at how you can put communities at the centre of building their own social and affordable houses and actually creating the future we want to see through building with natural materials and embedding renewable technologies.
There we are. So social enterprise opportunities. Hopefully some of you on the call today know that you contract with some social enterprises, some charities on your patch anyway, and you've got these covered, but there are opportunities for you to work with social enterprises and third sector organisations in your areas around health and wellbeing services, mental health services, falls prevention with the care and repair agencies locally, where we get people back home and get all the fixtures and fittings to allow them to get back home, befriending services and support carers. And we all know, again, in terms of the post-COVID recovery, that our unpaid carers need extra support because they've struggled for so long. And social enterprises can be part of that extra support to our carers, because unless we provide that extra support, they're going to fall over, which means there's more work for the statutory sector and for lots of us in the room to do that. If we move on, please, Catherine. There we are. Climate change opportunities within the co-op and within the social enterprise world. How are we going to move in the future, reacting to climate change and to work differently, and what can co-ops and social enterprises do? So the first thing, or one of the first things we're going to have to do, is retrofit all our social housing and our private housing. And is there a role there that we can set up social enterprises and co-ops to actually retrofit the cladding around our homes to stop heat seeping out? Huge job to do, and we can create good, well-paid jobs from people within our communities to do those roles. Community-owned energy. We've got really good examples of co-ops across Wales owning sort of wind turbines and solar panels and hydro schemes as well. But actually, could we get this to scale so we can create more community-owned energy, and having more energy from renewable sources, but also the money made from that energy stays within our communities and creates more wealth within our communities. Car clubs or car co-ops. Do we all need a car in the future, or could we be part of a club where we go on an app and order the car for a certain day and it's delivered to our door, we use it, and then it's picked up at the end of the day for another member of the car club to use tomorrow? So is that an opportunity that we can look at? And the charging infrastructure for co-ops, for electric vehicles across Wales. Could co-ops or social enterprises be part of that solution? So if we've got a charging point in a rural community, then if we charge our car, some of the money goes back into that community to subsidise community activity and well-being services within that community. And reuse and repair co-ops. We've got lots of positive examples of furniture recycling businesses all across Wales. We just need to up our game now in terms of reuse and repair, and things like repair cafes. Are we going to see more repair cafes within our town centres and within some of the shops that are becoming vacant? Can we use that a way to support people to utilise things for much longer, as opposed to getting rid of them and buying new? So there's huge potential there in terms of the reuse and repair sector for co-ops and social enterprises. Next slide, please, Catherine. Fab. This now in terms of the potential future models of co-ops within health and social care. And again, part of this talk is about how we build back after COVID. And one of the things that we've learned is that the voice of the citizen, of the people needing care and support, we need to bring that into the service more. We need to be able to listen and respond to our customers, our patients, far more quickly than we have in the past. And I think particularly now, as we try and learn from the pandemic and how we do things differently, then there is a real opportunity for cooperative working within how we deliver health and care. So I've got 3 examples here, but I'm going to go straight on to the next slide, which will concentrate on the sort of dom care model and the potential here in terms of to set up a cooperative that could be, owned by its workers or supporters or the users, to come together and form a co-op to deliver domiciliary care services. And if we go on to the next slide, Catherine. So actually the members, they could just be the workers, and it would work as a worker cooperative. It could be the workers and the users, or it could be workers, users and supporters, and it could work as a multi-stakeholder cooperative. One of the benefits of this is it could bring in the wider support from the community and from the volunteers and from other third sector organisations, and we could bring in family members of the users, so people who didn't need the services of the co-op but actually would bring in reciprocity and provide some support now on the basis that in years to come they will need to be a consumer of that service. So there's a real opportunity to bring the community into that service and to work together to improve sort of the domiciliary care type services that we put out there. So that's one example. If we go on to the next example of the GP Consortia Co-operative, and I mentioned this earlier on, really. We know in Wales there's lots of conversations happening around GP clusters and how we can make the clusters work more effectively, and how we can ask it to do different things. So by bringing the GPs together and forming some form of cooperative, could we do things slightly differently? And if we look at the next slide, Catherine, please. So in this model, the GP businesses themselves are the members of the Consortia Co-operative. So we would potentially look at formalising the existing clusters out there across Wales. Some of the benefits of the consortia could be joint purchasing. So instead of the GPs purchasing individually, they purchase on a group, so they get better deals by buying in bulk for the whole of the membership, is one potential benefit of the consortia working. Joint training of staff, if they've got the individual GP practice has got the sort of 10 staff to train those up, but then the whole of the consortia might have 100 and odd staff, so you get benefits when you look at staff training and resources. But also, if the consortia is set up in a way where profit isn't distributed to the members, but actually it's maintained within the consortia for the good of patients, then there's a potential that consortia cooperative could apply for additional funds and resources to look at well-being and prevention, to work alongside the sort of statutory, the medical provision that the GPs do. You could look at bringing in all sorts of prevention and other sort of well-being positive things within that consortia cooperative model. And then the last type of cooperative we could look at within the model, if we go on to the next slide, please, Catherine, is a community health co-op model in the future. And we know in Wales we've got a problem with the age of our GPs. We know lots of GPs want to leave practice and retire, and we know that the younger generation are not as keen to buy into practice, because why would they take on those liabilities of buying a business with an aging infrastructure of the surgery, being responsible for employing people, when they could actually earn a good wage as a locum, and they might want to move around the country to do that. So we know it's a problem. We've seen lots of GP practices taking on other practices, and we've seen that reduction in the amount of GPs. But actually, there's only so much one GP practice can take on before it becomes unsustainable. So is one potential solution to look at a community health cooperative. And here, if we go on to the next slide, Catherine, please. Here, we could set up a community benefit society, which is similar to a cooperative, but it's there for the benefit of the wider community, not just its members. We then elect a board to run the society on behalf of all its members, and the members in this case could be the staff involved in delivering the service, the patients, it could be the health board, and it could be the local authority and other stakeholders, in terms of they could all be members of the community sort of health cooperative. The good thing then is the profits made from running the GMS contract could be ploughed back into prevention and care and setting up similar services. It could set up its own domiciliary care service out of the surgery, for example, to do that. The other good thing as a co-op, those cooperative principles that I talked about earlier on, one of the principles is to train and educate your cooperative members And actually, we know we've got a shortage of doctors, so this particular community health co-op might decide to use its profits to send one of its members to medical school, and they come back and they are the new, community doctor. So there's lots of different ways that they could use the profit to sustain what it does as a community health cooperative, really. And I'm really passionate about that potential model and what it could do. And I think the next slide is just my details, I think, which is great. I'm amazed that I've remembered the what slide is coming next without having that in front of me. So my details are there, and you can drop me an email if you want, and or you can contact me, and if you want to arrange something on Teams as well, we come and have a conversation on Teams. If you want to find out more, that's fine. But if we could stop sharing the screen now, and Catherine, thank you for coming to my aid. This is an exercise in not how to do, and we jokingly said earlier when we all met, this is perfect, and sometimes it doesn't go right then when you've done your rehearsal, and it doesn't work out where you do it. So apologies to all of you listening that you didn't get to see those videos and all of the kerfuffle, and you saw my my confused state at the start of this. But thank you to Catherine for helping me out, really, and happy to take questions and hopefully have a bit of a conversation and look at potential and some ideas from people in the virtual room, Caris.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Glenn. I found that really interesting and very useful, because quite often you hear about these concepts, but hadn't had an appreciation really of all the difference between the subtle differences between the different types. So I found it very useful. We're just going to disable the function. So if anybody does want to come on camera, please raise your hand if you've got anything to ask Glenn, or pop it in the chat bar. I've just got a question to kick us off while people mull over if they've got any question. In terms of co-ops and social enterprises, they've probably been around for a very long time, because people, well, hopefully inherently good, aren't they? They want to do the right thing. But in terms of Wales and obviously those policy drivers, there's lots going on. Is there any kind of projections or modelling in terms of growth in co-ops? And yeah, just interested in a bit of a history, how far have we come and how far is the potential?
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly, the history of the co-op movement in Wales goes back a long way and predates the National Health Service. So most of us will know Aneurin Bevan's local society up in Tredegar, was thought to be one of the models. So before we had National Health Service, all of us in our communities put money into the pot to create medical services. And in my local community, the True Herbert Hospital here was set up, by the miners. So they were all forms of cooperative and welfare society. So there is a big history of cooperation in delivering health services. I suppose post 45, when it was decided that we would deliver the services as a state and the state would take on those services, then the sort of cooperative action sort of moved away into doing things like Friends of the League of Friends of Hospitals, and to work alongside the state to do that. It's only been more in recent years in terms of where effectively there's not enough resource within the National Health Service, where we look at bolt-ons from different types of co-ops. In terms of future, it's difficult to say, because obviously the Welsh Government and the First Minister are keen to look at cooperation in health and in social care. But I think we've now got the joint agreement with the Labour Party and Plaid Cymru in terms of the partnership agreement that talks about moving towards a national care service. So I know there's going to be some work done on that, but where that will fall in terms of will it be done all through sort of statutory and sort of public sector, or will it be a partnership with a flourishing co-op sector? I think the jury is probably still out until we see some of that sort of work that comes out of that document, I think, Ceris.
Perfect. Thanks, Glenn. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. I can't see anything in there at the minute. Anybody would like to ask a question? Want to raise their hand? Otherwise, I do have one other thing that I was curious about. A lot of the examples that you were given are quite sort of physical talking about the taxi ranks, the paper mill, they're quite sort of physical areas of work. And how will that change now in terms of automation and the kind of digitalization and the digital world that we're living in? Does that pose more opportunities, do you think, or does it increase kind of barriers? I'm just curious what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think that is a challenge for the co-op movement in terms of technology and digitalization, because we talked about the big tech companies, and the big thing they can do is raise lots of money because investors want to invest because they get more money back. So that's why you get big tech companies and money being thrown at things like Uber, because there's lots of money to be made by investors. In the co-op model, we don't give lots of money back to investors because we want that value to remain within the service. So how do we compete as a co-op movement when we want to develop those co-op platforms when we're not going to get the capital in? We're kind of we're beholden to really well-meaning people, coders, and there are people out there sort of that will want to code and put it out there into the public domain for the good of everybody, as opposed to keep it private and make personal profit out of it. So it's an interesting conversation that we have within the co-op movement, is how do we square that circle, and how do we get enough money to actually make the investment we need to become more digital and more orientated towards that.